the moment you've all been waiting for. It's time for the Steak for Breakfast Podcast.
It's Tuesday, May 6, 2025, and this is the Steak for Breakfast Podcast, episode 584 and 585. Make sure you subscribe to the show. It's available across every downloadable podcasting platform. Find us on Apple, Spotify, iHeart, Samsung, or Amazon Podcasts. Check out the Steak for Breakfast link tree to take your show's Instagram, our latest Substack, and verified accounts on X, Getter, and Zuso.
What's up, everybody? Welcome to the first of two big Tuesday editions of the show today. I'm Rowan. I'll be your host for the next couple hours, and as always, there's lots of breaking news. President Trump looks to make Alcatraz great again. We'll bring you all the latest on that. The Democrats, and of course the mainstream media, continue to do their best to stand in the way of the America First movement and President Trump's agenda. We'll check in on how the trade winds are blowing and what's the latest up on Capitol Hill. And President Trump welcomes the NFL. Puts Hollywood on notice and aims to silence the critics against the POTUS Pope. Don't worry. We'll make everything nice and clear for you, just like our great slate of guests coming in here today as well. South Carolina Congressman Ralph Norman will be joining us, as will Texas Congressman Troy Nehls will be here as well, and we'll catch up with Virginia Congressman Ben Cline. But before we get to any of our interviews, let's dive right into the headlines and change the way you consume your news.
Smokey, this is not Nam. This is bowling. There are rules.
Today, Junior, America!
Steak.
For breakfast! So stand by.
All right, everybody, welcome to the Steak for Breakfast Podcast. I'm Roan. I'll be your host for the next couple hours. If you're a first-time listener, welcome to the show. If you're a long-time listener, welcome back to America's fastest-growing and quickly becoming favorite political podcast on a busy News Tuesday. Hope everybody had a great weekend. Hope everybody's doing good in Steak for Breakfastville. Guys, make sure you're subscribed to the show. We're available across every downloadable podcasting platform. We prefer Apple and Spotify. Also, check us out on our new YouTube channel. In addition, gotta follow us on social media. We're on all the platforms. We're most active on X. So again, hope everybody had a great weekend. Hope you enjoyed both of our Friday editions of the show as well. Busy out here for us. We're in the midst of tryout season, sign-up season, playoff season, and just busy times. We had our first Little League playoff game yesterday for my son's team. Lost, unfortunately, 7-3. 5 unearned runs, which means runs scored on errors. Got an injury to our third baseman a couple games ago. He's also our cleanup hitter. One of the assistant coach's sons. Great kid, good talent. It's been a little bit of a gaping hole since he's been out, but hopefully we'll rebound. Now I got to go take the long road, one game through the losers bracket to get back into the winners one, but then it'll be on short rest. You know, everything about baseball revolves around pitching, so we'll see how it goes. I think the kids, though, have a little bit more of a story to write. Besides that, was it a busy weekend? It was a busy weekend. We were just a lot of running around. Daughters got soccer, daughters got volleyball, sons got baseball, and we got travel ball tryouts for my son coming up here in a couple weeks. My daughter's going to be jumping into some volleyball camps this summer, try to get a little bit more exposure indoor with the team, and then a little beach to kind of round out her resume, in addition to soccer, which they just finished their whole tryouts and team formation. So spending a lot of money on kids' sports, which is good, which is fine. But at the end of the day, it leaves little time for rest with work and life and obviously the show here. Busy week for the Trump administration, it's going to look like. President Trump is getting ready in about 7 days to depart for the Middle East and have a historic trip out there, Qatar, Dubai, Saudi Arabia, to name a few. He announced this morning that there would be a major announcement regarding his trip in the region ahead of that diplomatic endeavor that he's got coming up. So we're going to keep a good eye on that. We're going to be keeping a good eye on the headlines we're covering today, too. So it seems like President Trump, could it be an art of the weave? Could it be we do a little trolling here in America First? Or could it be legit? We'll talk about it. Making Alcatraz great again. We'll also check in on the Democrats and the media as they continue to do their best to slow the America First movement and President Trump's agenda. We'll also check in on how the trade winds are blowing. The latest on the big, beautiful bill as well. And if you hadn't heard already this week, President Trump welcomes the NFL to the West Wing, puts Hollywood on notice, and aims to silence the critics when it comes to MAGA pontifex deniers. We'll get into a great slate of guests coming in here today as well. Had Florida Representative Corey Mills scheduled to join the show. Will he be here? That's yet to be determined. If you hear him, we'll all enjoy it. If not, we'll hope for our Friday's edition to the podcast. But Rep. Ben Klein, Virginia Congressman, Rep. Ralph Norman, who's out of South Carolina, and the Texas Congressman Troy Nehls will all be joining us today for assuredly. And we're going to jump right into it right now. So there was some news that President Trump made during his time in meeting with the press gaggles before leaving the White House last week, during his time on the flights down to South Beach, going back to South Beach, on the tarmac once he's back, out on the lawn of the White House when he's returned on Marine One for the weekend. And, everybody wants to ask about Mike Waltz getting fired. He didn't. President Trump will clarify that a little bit later in the show. Singlegate, Pete Hegseth, violating the Constitution in regard to deportations. That's another narrative that you guys have to really continue to do a good job of promoting and pushing online, because here's the deal. Just when you're looking back at some of the former presidents, let's just say Bill Clinton, for example, over 12 million people deported during the 8 years that he was in office. Some of the least amount of federal injunctions in regards to these deportations, because remember, at the time, the Democrats didn't rely or want to court illegal aliens to be potential future voters. 99.9%, not an exaggerated number, an actual one, of the over 12 million people who were deported under Bill Clinton were done so without the standard acting due process, if you will. And what that means is they went and they had their claims heard, and there was no appeal process. There was a determination made that they weren't eligible. They were an economic migrant. They were either here illegally and detained, etc. Over 12 million. President Trump's creeping up on 200,000, and you've already seen injunction after restraining order, etc. And it's just, you need to understand, whether or not you think Joe Biden let 5, 10, 15, or 20 million people cross the U.S. southern border illegally and deposited them all over the United States over the course of the previous 4 years before Donald Trump came back to office, there is no way, there is no quantum physics equation that allows for all of those people to have due process in regards to their hearings and appeals and, free legal representation and things that matter. So the double standard is definitely in effect. One of the things that's been a pain in the ass to the Trump administration in regards to immigration has to do with, sending the criminally deported to places like Gitmo, people who have gone down to CCOT in El Salvador, and how it's just kind of blown up in the media, something they hold over the administration's head as a partial win or a non-win, when locking down the border in and of itself, without any of the funding or tools really needed, just basically what was left in the cupboard after Sleepy Joe Biden left the White House, is an accomplishment like we've never seen before in the history of this country. So we need to understand that, but at the same time, we need to find some other plausible solutions to, at least the apprehension and detention portion of it. Maybe things like the CBP One app turned CBP Home app, which is getting a little bit more of a revamping. We'll get to that later in this segment, as a possible solution or additional avenue to solving this problem. But President Trump is also looking into refitting or opening up detention centers and prisons here in the United States that have either been shuttered or not being used essentially for the things that they would best be utilized for, and that's housing bad people. So when President Trump got off Marine One on Sunday evening, once he returned back to the White House from Palm Beach, it was nice. He traveled with Melania Trump's father, who everyone knows lost his wife. President Trump lost his mother-in-law. Obviously, the First Lady lost her mom right before the November election. And it's good to see that relationship is there, and it's prominent, and it's public, and it's strong. You know, when family experience is lost, you'd like to see other figures step in, take on the burden of the emotional defeat, while at the same time, you know, providing the love and support that's needed to move on as a family unit. And I just thought, for the fact that Melania's dad traveled with President Trump on Air Force One, they took Marine One back to the White House. Looks like he'll be staying there with them for a little bit. That's cool. I think it's good optics, and definitely a win for President Trump. But they broke off of each other. Obviously, Donald Trump's father-in-law going into the White House, and President Trump coming over to meet the fake news press. And when he did, he had this to say about the new hot topic, or, much in the same way as he's utilized his potential run in 2028. It's not happening, but he likes to talk about it. Here's a little art of the weave in regards to Alcatraz. Let's hear it.
Get the idea for reopening Alcatraz.
Just an idea I've had, and I guess because the judges, so many of these radicalized judges, they want to have trials for every single, think of it, every single person that's in our country illegally, that came in illegally. That would mean millions of trials, and it's just so ridiculous what's happening. And it's long been a symbol, Alcatraz, of whatever it is. I mean, you know, it's a sad symbol, but it's a symbol of law and order. And, you know, it's got quite a history, frankly. Yeah. So I think we're going to do that, and we're looking at it right now.
You know, it's cool that we have a president who thinks boldly, thinks down the road, utilizes the long game. You know, that's part of the business component of President Trump's persona that he brings into the political arena. But I like the fact that we have someone who's a free thinker, who's a big thinker, and when these ideas come up, granted, he has the platform of the chief executive of essentially the entire planet, obviously the United States as well, and just says them. Well, everybody's giving me shit for sending criminal illegal aliens down to CCOT in El Salvador. What if we make our own and use Alcatraz as the blueprint? What if we actually use Alcatraz and refit it to be like CCOT? That would be cool. And then everybody just starts melting down. But President Trump put out a post on his official X account, which complimented that brief statement and this idea. Let's hear it. Rebuild and open Alcatraz. For too long, America has been plagued by violent, vicious, and repeat criminal offenders, the dregs of society who will never contribute anything other than misery and suffering. When we were a more serious nation in times past, we did not hesitate to lock up the most dangerous criminals and keep them far away from anyone who they could harm. That's the way it's supposed to be. No longer will we tolerate these serial offenders who spread filth, bloodshed, and mayhem on our streets. That is why today I am directing the Bureau of Prisons, together with the Department of Justice, FBI, Homeland Security, to reopen a substantially enlarged and rebuilt Alcatraz to house America's most ruthless and violent offenders. We will no longer be held hostage to criminals, thugs, and judges who are afraid to do their job and allow us to remove criminals who came into our country illegally. The reopening of Alcatraz will serve as a symbol of law, order, and justice. And in time, we will make America great again. I like it. I think everybody does. And when you look at the big scheme of things, it's not a bad idea. If Alcatraz is the start of maybe several entities or facilities like that, which are going to be used to house criminal illegal aliens and some of the worst from here in the United States. Listen, we end the debate on, is it constitutionally okay to house American citizens in places like Gitmo or in CCOT if we have something similar here with Alcatraz out off, you know, the San Francisco harbor? So pretty cool, pretty interesting. And President Trump elaborated on it yesterday during an Oval Office meeting with NFL executives, including the commissioner of the league, Roger Goodell. We'll get to that a little bit later in the show, but here's President Trump answering a question about reopening the prison. Check it out.
To reopen Alcatraz, how will you use it? How did you come up with the idea?
Well, I guess I was supposed to be a movie maker. We started with the movie making and we'll end. I mean, it represents something very strong, very powerful in terms of law and order. Our country needs law and order. Alcatraz is, I would say, the ultimate, right? Alcatraz, Sing Sing and Alcatraz, the movies. But
Sing Sing.
it's right now a museum, believe it or not. A lot of people go there. It housed the most violent criminals in the world, and nobody ever escaped. One person almost got there, but they, as you know the story, they found his clothing rather badly ripped up, and it was a lot of shark bites, a lot of problems. Nobody's ever escaped from Alcatraz, and just represented something strong having to do with law and order. We need law and order in this country. And so we're going to look at it. Some of the people up here are going to be working very hard on that. And we had a little conversation. I think it's going to be very interesting. We'll see if we can bring it back in large form, add a lot. But I think it represents something. Right now it's a big hulk that's sitting there rusting and rotting. You look at it, it's sort of, you saw that picture that was put out. It's sort of amazing. But it sort of represents something that's both horrible and beautiful and strong and miserable, weak. It's got a lot of qualities that are interesting, and I think they make a point.
It's good stuff. It is. Like I said, you have a president who wears his ideas and his theories and his desires for this country on his shoulders, on his sleeves. And it's just amazing to see how the media kind of is just led along down the path of, they want to ask him questions like he doesn't know about it. He might not know the history, the great and immense cost it would take not only to refurbish and refit the facility, but modernize it. And then, all of the cost that would be put onto the taxpayer in regards to, let's just say, bringing supplies and employees in, bringing waste and things like sewage out. But at the end of the day, and in such a modern age, if we were able to do it efficiently-ish back when it was opened, I don't think that we would have a hard time doing it now. And listen, if these judges are going to stand in the way of President Trump, he has to think of the worst workable solution legally possible to get them to back off. And I think doing something like this is just that. I know a lot of members of Congress will be talking to him about it today, and members of the Senate as well. We're pretty excited about this announcement. Just the possibility of looking into having a modern-day Alcatraz open and working for the American people. I saw Missouri Senator Eric Schmidt jump on with Harris Faulkner yesterday afternoon to talk about this. Let's hear him.
Yeah, this is what the Democrats, they lose their mind because of Trump derangement syndrome, but why President Trump has been so effective. Alcatraz means something, right? And so when you have a law and order president, you're dealing with two tracks here. One is punishment. People ought to be punished for the crimes they've committed. And also deterrence. It works in foreign policy. It has worked now with our border. People know if they try to come here legally, they're not getting in, they're going to be turned away. So if you're the worst of the worst, if you're a criminal who's coming here illegally, the idea of being on an island in Alcatraz is a deterrent. And that's exactly what President Trump is doing. He's saying we need more space, and there ought to be a space dedicated for the people who are the worst among us who've come here illegally and committed crimes. And so it's all sort of working in one direction here. And I think President Trump is very smart to put this out there and actually have a place where the worst of the worst go in our country, because that's kind of how we've always done things. It's only recently that the left has just sort of decided that there's not going to be punishment for crimes, whether it's on illegal immigration or the Soros prosecutors in our cities. They knew they were going to get away literally with murder. They knew they would get away literally with murder, and that is changing because we have a law and order president.
Guys, wherever you're listening to the show today, hope you're enjoying the first of two big Tuesday editions of the Steak for Breakfast podcast. Do us a favor, share Steak for Breakfast with your friends, family, coworkers, and loved ones. Head over to your favorite podcasting platform, whether it's Apple, Spotify, iHeart, Samsung, Amazon Podcast, or wherever you're hearing the show today, and subscribe for free. Make sure we're downloading to your electronic device. Rate us 5 stars, and please write a review, and then check us out on social media. We're on Twitter, Getter, True Social, Instagram, and TikTok. Find the accounts, follow them, hit the notification bell. You'll never miss out on all the great stuff we're working on down here at Steak for Breakfast. So in addition to rekindling the fire and the narrative that is Alcatraz, there have been some other additions to the Trump immigration policies that we've seen, all be them slow-walked, by the judiciary, the Trump administration are always doing the best they can to try and stay ahead of the game. So everybody remembers the CBP One app. That was the Biden flights app, or ways that illegals could schedule appointments to either be flown in from their country of origin into the United States commercially, or walk up to one of the stations at the borders where cars and people cross, claim asylum, say they have an appointment, get their notice to appear, and get released into the interior of the country. Well, now, since the app was turned off, revamped and turned back on as the CBP Home app, it's now like a one-stop shop for the Department of Homeland Security and places like the FBI to identify all the people who were in the process through this app and set them up to make sure that they don't receive any federal funding. There might be a point in the near future where they're being fined up to $900 or $1,000 a day. They won't be able to buy any property in the United States. And if they refuse to leave at the administration's direction, then they will never be allowed to come into this country legally and go through the process ever again. One of the new things added, with an announcement coming yesterday, was that the CBP Home app now, through the Trump Department of Homeland Security, is setting up things for illegals to kind of finalize their own departure methods. Having the federal government pick up the tab on commercial flights out of the country and back home, and even be eligible to receive $1,000 stipend, kind of here's a parting gift to start your new life back in the only country you have legal status in. It's a lot of working parts, but at the same time, definitely something that's innovative and probably can only be pulled off by the Trump administration. We're going to hear about it right now. Let's check it out.
So Fox News can report exclusively that DHS will announce today that they're going to start paying for the commercial flights of illegal aliens who self-deport from the U.S. And on top of that, they're going to pay them an additional $1,000 stipend once they're confirmed to have left the country. Now, DHS says doing this is going to be significantly cheaper for the American taxpayer. They tell us that right now it costs on average about $17,000 to arrest, detain, and deport someone. They say paying for self-deportations and the stipend will only cost about $4,500 per person. That's about 70% cheaper. Aliens are going to have to register to self-deport on the new CBP Home app to access that DHS financial assistance, as well as announce their intent to leave the country. DHS Secretary Kristi Noem tells Fox in part, quote, "If you are here illegally, self-deportation is the best, safest, and most cost-effective way to leave the United States to avoid arrest." In the meantime, here in the sanctuary city of Los Angeles, ICE confirms to Fox News that 3 suspects arrested in connection with the home invasion murder of a man in the Woodland Hills neighborhood last Sunday are all in the U.S. illegally.
All in the U.S. illegally. Wonderful. Again, what the administration is trying to do within the parameters that they feel won't get injuncted, won't get restraining ordered, won't get bogged down in court, won't have the media make up fake narratives about, is where they're kind of operating now, as a lot of the stuff that's tied up in the judiciary goes through the appellate process and eventually will get to the Supreme Court. Remember, that's a months, possibly years process where President Trump is looking at days and almost immediately as possible. So it is what it is, but I think that this is another great way to incentivize the people who are here, who are now getting cut off from all the freebies, to return to their country of origin and either start the process over, or if they were incentivized to leave by, let's say, NGOs or their own government, remain where they belong, as we cannot let 20, 30, 40 million illegals in this country bog down every system, from healthcare and education to the jobs market and everything in between. Obviously, the rising crime rates as well. You know, Big Tom Homan, our Thanos, was going to weigh in on this. He came down past Pebble Beach to the end of the driveway at the White House yesterday to catch up with the press gaggle, and had this to say about the new additions to the CBP Home app. Let's check it out.
I think people are finally getting the message. If you leave on your own, you can take advantage of legal programs, come back. But if we have to go through the process of formally deporting you, there are mandatory bars against you for up to 20 years, sometimes forever. So, if you want to take advantage, come back as a, a worker, a tourist visa, a visitor's visa, a student visa, or have a U.S. citizen child if you have one, petition for you in the future. Leave yourself open to the opportunity of legal entry. Do things the right way. There's millions of people standing in line right now doing things the right way. Taking the test, doing the background investigations, paying their fees. They're sitting in the back seat. While millions of people are allowed into this country under the Biden administration that simply don't qualify for asylum. Most of them will lose that asylum claim. So while they're clogging up the whole system, in addition to those who want to come in legally, while the millions of fraudulent asylum claims under the Biden administration, there are people in this world who really are escaping fear and persecution from their homeland. But they're sitting in the back seat too because millions of people cheated the system, coming across the border and released in the United States that caused a significant backlog in immigration court. And that wasn't by accident, it's by design. Let's just overwhelm the system so it takes 5, 7, 9 years to go through the whole process if they take advantage of the appeals process. They know exactly what they're doing. That's why they weren't in ICE detention. Because in ICE detention, they get a hearing within 35 days. But if we release millions of the country, overwhelm the system so they don't get a hearing in 5, 7, 9 years, then maybe there's a Democrat administration in power. Now we can have an amnesty. They know exactly what they're doing. They're playing the long game. But we're going to beat them at it. We're going to ramp up interior enforcement operations and removals. We're going to force the law. We're not going to ignore the law like the prior administration did.
So that's that. It's not always fire and brimstone and toughness and fury with someone like the Mad Titan, Tom Homan. When a plan is laid out like this, which had a lot of administrative input worked into it, it's something that you want to roll out and be able to calmly explain to the American people, but also the illegals who are watching and listening across the country as well. Listen, at the end of the day and under this administration, I pray every day in administration's future, they won't have the freebies anymore. The SNAP, the WIC, the EBT, the Medicaid, the free education without paying any taxes, the free health care, and every other thing that, illegals enjoy in this country that we as U.S. citizens do not. And even yesterday when you saw Cinco de Mayo celebrations at an all-time low, ole, while we like to remember things like the best taco bowls are sold at Trump Tower and the iconic tweet from Donald Trump a decade ago, we do have to look at the poll numbers. 62% of Hispanics, last week RCP, still support President Trump, his agenda, which includes the immigration package. The number of Americans who still want all illegal and legal aliens who aren't going through the process anymore removed from this country is still near 60%. And I know I touched on it in a little bit of lightheartedness, but even places like fake news CNN were melting down about it. What is the actual Trump effect? Well, let's just say not as many people as usual were trying to find the worm at the bottom of the barrel on Cinco de Mayo, which was yesterday. Check this out.
Today is May 5th, and that means Cinco de Mayo, Wolf, a holiday that celebrates Mexico's victory over France. But some, in the Battle of Puebla, I should say, but some communities have canceled or scaled back cultural events because of President Trump's crackdown on illegal immigration and the fear among many Latinos that they could be arrested.
Even down here in Southern California, the overt public displays of what essentially is a Hallmark holiday here in the United States. I don't know if you guys know this, but actual Mexicans don't celebrate Cinco de Mayo. It's just funny to watch the media melt down, and even at a time where it should be good that people aren't taking over freeways and walking out of schools and doing all this crazy shit that the protesters and the radical left do to celebrate weird holidays like Cinco de Mayo, in addition to all the ridiculous drinking and overeating that happens as well. Well, they spin it into something bad about President Trump. But again, 92% negative coverage. No surprise there. Be surprised that we're done with this segment and getting ready to jump in with the South Carolina congressman who's coming back to the show, Ralph Norman, in just a second. But before we jump in with him, we're going to have a first check-in with one of our partners. I think it's time we had a conversation about a good night's sleep. Pillow King of Minnesota, Mike Lindell, and the apparatus known as the MyPillow family has been cranking out savings down at MyPillow for over 20 years. And for the first time in 20 years, they've changed the long-standing MyPillow and now have the MyPillow version 2.0. You enter promo code STAKE at checkout, you're going to get buy one, get one free. In addition to that, they've got great savings on all things like MyPillow dog beds, the Air Lindell version 1 and 2, My Slippers, and Giza Dream Everything. If you're more of a morning person, they've launched My Coffee. It's available in the bean, the bag, and the pod. When you enter promo code STAKE here, you're going to get 25% off your order or 50% off when you make it a monthly subscription. MyPillow.com/stake for anything sleep related. If you want the coffee, mystore.com/stake, or you can always talk to a qualified pillow representative. 1-800-658-8045. All right, joining us first on the show today, this big Tuesday edition of the Steak for Breakfast podcast, he's the congressman who represents South Carolina's 5th Congressional District, which means we're welcoming back Representative Ralph Norman. Thanks for coming on the show.
My pleasure.
Always a pleasure to host. Congressman, want to get started today talking about post first 100 days for the Trump administration, some of the accomplishments that you think are the biggest highlights. Obviously, immigration is going to be one of them, and how important now the next 100 days is going to be, not just for President Trump and his administration, but working hand in hand with Congress and you guys.
If I had to describe the first 100 days, Ron, would be in 4 words: promises made, promises kept. The same thing he did when he was elected in 2016, the same things he's doing now. You know, and it's not just immigration, deportation, law and order, gas drilling, regulation cuts, and being an advocate basically for America. He's given people confidence. The day he took office, and when he took the oath, put his hand on the Bible, you could almost hear a pin drop in our nation's capital. He's like no other. The first 100 days of executive orders were spot on. We've got to codify a lot of the things that he's doing. But he just is giving the country a confidence that we haven't had, particularly 4 years under the Biden administration, which were total dismal, off the tracks record of giving away America to all of our enemies. But he strengthened our military, and one of the great things he's done is put people in places of power who know what they're doing. They're experts, they're professionals. So that's just a few of them.
No, that's a really good point. You know, you had mentioned the immigration stuff, and I want to stick in that thread. Listen, we just saw yesterday the artist formerly known as the CBP One app, now the CBP Home app, is making it even easier for illegals who were brought in under Joe Biden and Kamala Harris to self-deport themselves from the United States. So much so that it'll be saving the American taxpayers thousands of dollars and even giving monetary incentives for illegals who are here and want to leave on their own. Listen, with all the stuff that's going on at the judiciary level and has these things crawl towards the Supreme Court, the Trump administration and Congress is going to have to use some innovative ways to work on the immigration issue and make sure that the mandate that America wanted, this being one of the top ones, is being dealt with accordingly. How do you feel the administration is working outside the box like this CBP Home app now to ensure that it is another instance of promises made and promises kept?
Well, the CBP app is an ingenious way to do things. The fact that he's put $1,000 of people who will self-deport. Now, if you think, for your listeners, if you think about what that's doing, that's saving the law enforcement for having to go round them up. In many cases, is with the criminals that he's rounding up, is saving potential lives.
Right.
And it's just making it easy. And the genius of Donald Trump and his team is, and from what I've heard other people say, is the fact that if they don't do that, they'll never come back, even have a chance to come back in America. That's a big stick to lever, and that's a big stick that I think a lot of the ones that eventually want to come back the legal way.
Yeah.
I think when Biden opened it up, the goal was to create a voting class of people that would keep them in office, and it didn't work. And so all across the board, he just has come up with ways that a good businessman like Trump has used for the betterment of the country.
How frustrating is it from your vantage point, Congressman, to have been serving for the last 4 years and before Donald Trump came back to office, to watch a lot of, if not all, the judiciary stand on the sidelines and not do anything in regards to the immigration issue and what Joe Biden and Kamala Harris did, especially at the borders, and how many people were allowed to come in here, how they were allowed to come in here, and in the methods that they were released into the country. And, now to see that everybody wants to injunct, to temporary restraining order, and push back on President Trump's immigration policies. At the same time, you look back at the numbers, both of the federal injunctions that were done against, the totality of the 3 presidents before President Trump, how many more millions of people were deported under people like Obama and Bill Clinton without the thing that they use now as the catchphrase, due process, or their constitutional rights, and how much of an incentive is that for Congress to really get on the ball and support President Trump in his immigration policies to make sure that we take out a lot of those questions and start delivering with some answers?
Well, the great thing about what he's doing is he's ignoring them. I mean, you've got a Democratic Party that is taking the side of MS-13. You got a Democratic Party who supported lawlessness and invasion at the border, and that's the only thing you can call it. And they did it with impunity. And you've got the ex-president, Joe Biden, said he could close the border if he had legislation. Well, how is that working? Donald Trump hadn't asked for legislation. He's just doing it. He has the willpower to continue building the wall and stopping what's illegal in the first place, and it's against the Constitution. Now, this was a coordinated effort. And look at the lives lost. Look at it's not just the Laken Rileys, it's the unreported deaths that occurred. Look
Correct.
at the fentanyl that's killed hundreds of thousands of our young people and old alike. So it doesn't surprise me that the left is doing this. I was in the Capitol when they wouldn't stand up for anything Donald Trump said, for the cancer survivor, to the law enforcement heroes that he recognized. Previously, when Rush Limbaugh was recognized in the first term of the Trump administration, they wouldn't stand for that. So it doesn't surprise me, but the left now is totally socialistic, and the left is a party we cannot allow to have power anytime in the future.
The grandstanding and slow walking of everything going on congressionally, which is where we're going to segue to now. So we're through the budget resolution. We're into committee work and markups. An overwhelming majority of them are done and getting ready in the next week to 10 days to be ready to be reviewed by Jody Arrington and the rest of that committee as well. Tell us a little bit about that process. It's been a learning curve and a little bit difficult at time for Republicans to stick together, but I think with the encouragement of the American people, how many votes you guys received in the last election, plus strong leadership like yourself, Congressman, to remain on the same page, kind of check your egos and inhibitions at the door, and let's get this done for President Trump and the American people. We are heading towards a big, beautiful reconciliation package right now.
We are, and I'll give you an example of just trying to thwart everything we're trying to do. I'm on the Financial Services Committee. We were marking up the bills, and we had 60 amendments that the Democrats put up. A lot of them were redundant. A lot of them were not germane to what we were talking about. And you got to remember, now they stopped at 40-something, but we were well into the night when we got through voting them all down. And, the same thing happened at rules last night when we were talking about the Confucius Institute and China's influence on the universities, stopping that. And then an amendment was put up on tariffs. And I brought up the issue of germaneness. The two are not the same. You can't link those two together. And an amendment shouldn't have been put up. But does that surprise me? No. They will stall and tap dance and try to take as much time as they can. But that's fine with me. I get it. Under the rules, they can do it. And let them stay up till midnight. I'll stay up 2 and 3 nights in a row. It doesn't matter, because they're wrong, and what they're doing is the American people finally are having a front row seat on, and they don't agree with them.
No, they certainly don't. Pretty much on all of the issues that you'd mentioned and a lot of the other ones socially that they just won't let go of either. Congressman, there have been a couple announcements coming out of the Trump administration this week. Yesterday, he had Roger Goodell and a delegation from the NFL in there talking about having the NFL draft in Washington, D.C. and on the National Mall in a couple years. In addition to that, was talking about reigning in Hollywood and making sure that we could start making great movies here in America again. We even talked about refitting and modernizing Alcatraz prison or something like it as kind of a way for us to handle the issue of maybe not having to send the worst of the worst down to El Salvador and seek out. We could have one just like it in the United States here. When you see this, agenda that keeps getting rolled out, and there are things on the back burner, but at the same time, President Trump just keeps trying to stay ahead of everyone, the Democrats, the media, etc. It seems like it's a pretty breakneck speed, but at the same time, there isn't a thing that he doesn't have his hand in right now that would be of some kind of interest to the American people.
No, and I tell you, Ronan, President Trump is having fun now. He is, thinking outside the box. Taxing films, 50% of the films over 40,000 are out of the country. Why not have them here? They're selling them here. Having the draft in Washington, D.C. Now, think about what that's doing to the vendors, to that restaurant that maybe is slow when we're not in session. Think about how good that is. The Gulf of America, he's putting America first, not Mexico or not any other country that don't particularly have our interest at heart. But all across the board, he is action. He's an entrepreneur, and he's been successful in the business arena, and he's successfully transforming this country, which, quite frankly, had the election gone the other way, this country would have been under total socialistic domination by big government and those elite rulers in power. But 77 million people said it wasn't going to work, and they didn't vote. They voted a man who was mentally incompetent out of office, as they should have.
And watching how everyone's trying to keep up with this. I mean, the media wants to stick in the same thread of, like you said, sticking up for MS-13. They want to ask him if he's running for re-election in 2028 and all these other silly things that they kind of hold on to, instead of the actual things that you guys and the president with his administration is working on for the American people. Listen, Congressman, always a pleasure when we catch up with you. We know it's a busy week up on Capitol Hill. Going to be a busy couple weeks leading up until Memorial Day and even the 4th of July. Always grateful when you could come and share with our listenership. We've got everything live linked in our show description today, including a link to your congressional website. They could sign up for your newsletter, see all the great work that's going on up on Capitol Hill and in District. Where can we find you on social media? We'll live link that as well.
RepRalphNorman.com.
This guy does not take very many breaks. He took one today to share with us here on the show. This is the congressman representing South Carolina's 5th Congressional District, Representative Ralph Norman. Thanks for joining us on the show, sir. Have a great rest of your week, and we'll see you again soon.
My pleasure. Thank you, Ron.
The media is so fake, including, like, even the way you ask questions. Every question is asked in a negative vein. There's a toy company that took a toddler's, whatever, but you don't talk about the fact that gasoline is down at numbers that nobody believes possible. You know why they're down, by the way? Drill, baby, drill. We're drilling like crazy right now.
We try to make sure every question is fair, Mr. President.
Look, every question you ask says a very negative slant.
No, but look, I'm just curious.
I'm fine for responding to you. I don't think you're very difficult at all to respond to be honest with you. But you know what? You should ask some positive things like, sir, it's amazing what you've done with gasoline. Because you know what? Gasoline's big business. A stroller is not big business.
All right, jump back into the news portion of the show here. Second news segment on the first of two Tuesday editions of the Steak for Breakfast podcast. I'm still Roan. And it was great catching up with South Carolina Congressman Ralph Norman to get our interview blocks kicked off today. And that was President Trump, who sat down with Kristen Welker on ABC's Meet the Fake Press this weekend and did just that by calling them out at one point of the interview. Listen, no real meat and potatoes in regards to that segment. Trump wanted to talk accomplishments. He wanted to talk about how the judiciary is being gamed against his administration. He wants to talk about the will and the mandate given to him by the American people, etc. And, they want to push back on bringing whatever Kumar Abrego home and not giving illegal aliens their constitutional due process. And you name it, they kind of tried to bust his balls on it. I mean, you know how we feel about Kristen Welker here on the show.
Shut up, bitch!
And it goes without saying. But, I mean, when you look at what's going on right now, and we're going to be talking about how the Democrats and the media are continuing to try and do their best to stand in the way of the America First movement and the Trump agenda, even though there is a huge leadership void within the party, talking about the Democrats, and the messaging remains the same, mixed, concerning to a lot of their own constituents, to say the very least. You just kind of have to understand what all the play they get and the screens they get in front of in regards to the American people, as long as the media is going to be willing at the sacrifice of their own ratings and credibility to go after President Trump for bullshit, we're going to see much more of the same. And we know where the control is coming from. It's not just those who are prominent members of the Democrat Party. It's the big-time elites who control the Democrat apparatus as well. Lying, crying, Chuck Todd, who lost his show for podcasting ventures, sat on fake news CNN's afternoon panel yesterday and kind of let the cat out of the bag in regards to who's manipulating the strings behind the scenes of the Democrat Party. Let's check it out.
Look, in 2022, after the midterms, I said if you want to run for president and be the Democratic nominee, anybody who wants to run should be able to run. Unfortunately, nobody, well, a couple people, but
Dean Phillips.
Right, Dean Phillips stepped up. Democrats, we should have had a primary for this midterm election. And we didn't. And so now we're living with the consequences of it. I hope that our party wakes up and realizes it. And that me saying that doesn't mean that I don't respect Joe Biden. But there's a reality in that we should have given our voters an opportunity to make a decision for themselves. And by the time we had to make a decision, it was too late.
By the way, it's just 3 straight nominations where Democratic voters didn't get a chance to pick the nominee. The elites picked Hillary Clinton, the elites picked Joe Biden, and the elites picked Kamala Harris. There was no actual set of voters who felt like they had a say in this.
Yeah. I'm also still wondering. So let's just assume that Democrats do not decide that they are interested in reformulating the pizza. They just want to spend time focused on refashioning the pizza box. I still don't even know what that's going to be. I mean, here we were talking about a strongly worded letter, and that got the endorsement of like, yep, that's what we need to be doing, more strongly worded letters. I'm not really sure that Democrats yet have figured out stylistically, how do we want to?
I mean, the voters think that that's incredibly lame right now. Is what they're telling us.
Right? Remember the paddles at the State of the Union?
Wait, I'll just say, okay. I think that there are some different conversations that are happening in the party. There are people like myself who are like, I'm getting out of Washington, D.C. I didn't stay here for the correspondence dinner. You know why? Because the voters I want to talk to, they aren't watching the correspondence dinner, whether there was a comedian or not. That is not what people are focusing on. They're not, sadly, getting their news from CNN. They're getting their news from online. And so I have also said this, that when Donald Trump lost in 2020, Republicans didn't change their message. They actually doubled down on it. I do think Democrats have policies that people like. I do think we have a communications and I think we have a messenger problem right now, which goes to the candidates. So we need to make sure we have we talk about being the Big Tent Coalition. We actually need to be the Big Tent Coalition, which means sometimes you will have in your coalition people you don't always agree with. But that's what was so special about the Democratic Party. I don't have to get 100% at it. But
saying you are going to send a strongly worded letter in today's political climate is roughly the equivalent of putting a slice of cheese on a frozen hamburger patty on a grill.
And here comes Scott Jennings with a steel chair.
For doing. You've totally missed.
I was wondering where you were going there. Okay.
You have completely and totally misunderstood the way political communications work, just the way you misunderstand the way grills work. That is not going to cut it for them. And by the way, Clyburn saying he had no idea Joe Biden was in decline and wasn't in a position to know whether he was in decline, his biggest supporter in Congress, Lord have mercy. The scandal deepens, is what I took.
That's a true story. And I wanted you to get all that segment in there to, sometimes without yelling and screaming, and it's probably because Scott Jennings was obviously outnumbered 5-1, but at the same time, it was a reasonable conversation. The Democrats were kind of coming to terms with Jesus. 3 straight election cycles where they don't get to pick their candidate. There should have been a primary process once it was determined that Joe Biden wasn't going to run for re-election in 2024 as well, probably. But then they go back to that stuff. Again, the elites, the influencers, the billionaires, the consultants, they're the ones that are pulling the strings right now. And when that gal says, who used to be a pretty big figure within the DNC, that they still have good messaging, and that messaging resonates with the American people, she is talking about trans everything, alternate versions of history, everything, including things like not celebrating Columbus Day in the 1619 Project. They're talking about everything is racist. They're talking about everything is pronouns. They're talking about open borders. They're talking about not being hard on crime. The American people really doesn't identify with that messaging. And actually, they referendumed it pretty hard in 2024. I think just off of the scare tactics of the potentiality of the borders being busted open again under a Democrat president, they very well might be what keeps the gavel in Republican hands in the House of Representatives and a Republican in the White House in 2028, in my opinion. Very early as well. Speaking of pronouns, It just came across the Chiron today, a little bit ago, that the Supreme Court made a historic ruling in favor of the Trump administration, saying that President Trump is allowed to, and without getting into the nitty-gritty of it, ban transgenders and everything to do with them from all components of the U.S. military if he so chooses to, which he did. He wrote an executive order on that. So that executive order will be upstanding. There will be no more trans surgeries, no more trans caterings, no more sensitivity trainings, so on and so forth. So a big win for the Trump administration coming via the Supreme Court. Again, a 6-3 ruling, which is what most of the rulings should be. But yeah, that's kind of where we're at right now. And again, you talk about the elites, you talk about what's going on within the Democrat Party. You talk about the fact that you didn't have the opportunity to pick your own candidate because they were just kind of presented as the person who was going to beat or stop or slow or was the best against Donald Trump. And here's the deal. You know, you got Hillary and you got Obama and then you got Joe Biden and then you got Kamala Harris. You know, and during the last election cycle, I think an overwhelming majority of the party didn't want Kamala Harris, but they told you via fake news polls and people overtly come out and, you know, probably being paid to say so, that she was the most viable candidate to not only represent the party, their beliefs and their mission, but again, beat Donald Trump. So here's the deal. You know, it's been rumored for more than a week now that Kamala Harris might be making an announcement to kick off her candidacy for the governor of California out here, which would be done via election in 2026 during the midterms. However, I'm starting to hear conflicting reports that a lot of the major consultants are saying that she's like, believe it or not, the most normal or identifiable figure at the top of the Democrat Party right now. So they might actually be setting her up to run for election again in 2028. So I think you know what you get when you got Kamala Harris. I mean, I just pulled a tiny little snip of her this weekend. Let's check it out.
About like these moments where we see things that are being taken, but also let's see it as a, you know, nature abhors a vacuum. So where there's a vacancy, then let's fill it. Right? And let's know that the reality is that the progress of our nation has always been about the expansion of rights, not the restriction of rights. We're seeing a U-turn right now, but we have to keep fighting for those rights to be maintained, which means we have to be vigilant, and it's just the nature of it.
I mean, well, for starters, sorry, Noah.
What in the actual fuck?
I mean, technically she's not wrong. Voids are fillable, but what the fuck is she talking about? Please keep running these people. Run her, run Buttigieg's, run Newsom's, run Whitmer's, run Pritzker's, run Crockett's, run AOC's. Come on, Bernie. Bring the walker. All 87 glorious years old that you'll be in 2028. Come on and run against whatever. I mean, listen, just in the first 5-ish months of the second Trump administration, Donald Trump has already loaded Marco Rubio's resume so packed with everything and all the different hats he has to wear. I think he's going to be the best, absolute, most prepared vice presidential candidate to run with J.D. Vance, who will probably, more than likely, be the presidential representation in 2028. It's going to be hard to beat him. You got J.D. Vance. He's young. He's relatable. Trump likes him. So on and so forth. You know, came from the business sector, was in the military, rose from poverty. Now he's vice president of the United States. Then you got Marco Rubio. He's kind of done it all politically. Congress member, senator. Now he's the Secretary of State. In addition to that, he's wore all these different hats. He's running USAID. Now he's the director of the NSA, and so on and so forth. You put those two together, little sprinkling of Latino-ness with Marco Rubio, and it's going to be a pretty tough ticket to defeat. I mean, a Bernie AOC, a Newsom, Jasmine Crockett, you're talking about probably a larger electoral margin in 2028 than you saw in 2024 when President Trump beat Kamala Harris and creepy Tim Walz. So that's kind of what's going on with them right now. we'll talk about Mike Waltz in just a second. But first, guys, wherever you're listening to the show today, do us a favor. Make sure you're subscribed to the Steak for Breakfast podcast. Find us on any platform. We prefer Apple or Spotify. Download the show, rate it 5 stars, write a review, and then check us out on social media. We're on all of them, but we're most active on X. During his trip back to D.C. from South Beach on Sunday, President Trump came out and talked to the press gaggle, which is allowed to, convey with him on Air Force One. They talked about a bunch of different things. One of the things that came up was what was going on with Mike Waltz. Remember, we had the Friday announcement that he was going to be moved, not fired, not demoted, not anything, moved from his current position as NSA director and now be nominated to be the U.S. ambassador to the United Nations. A lot of people consider that resume-wise as a promotion for things that, Mike might want to do down the road and in the future. So, again, much in the same way he called out Kristen Welker on Meet the Fake Press, here's what President Trump had to say when the press asked him why he fired, essentially, Mike Waltz, and what does it mean for the position moving forward?
He was fine, and where he is, he'll do a good job. I don't consider that. I didn't lose confidence in him. Why did I lose confidence? He's going to the United Nations. To me, I think it's personally, if I had to choose for myself of doing, I'd rather have that job than the other. He resigned on his own. He didn't resign. I just moved him. There's no resignation. You people are so bad. You're trying to make a big deal out of something that's not. You are so bad. That's why nobody watches you anymore. Who are you with? Who are you with? You with who? First. I didn't know there was such a.
Never heard of her. Gotta love it. Gotta love him too. And last clip I've got before we jump in with Texas Congressman Troy Nehls. It's talking about this issue with the Democrats and the media and what they're kind of rolling out against President Trump and to combat the America First movement. I had mentioned one of the people as potential picks to run for a nationwide office in 2028. And Jasmine Crockett's being, in a lot of Democrat circles, elevated into that position as someone who's I guess what they consider a strong representative of the Marxist progressive movement. Man, if anyone listening to this show knows of her district physically in Texas, please email me, hit my DMs, in a show post in the comments. Please tell me what this district looks like. I can't imagine how bad it is to have that as now your 2-time representative after serving for a number of years in the Texas State House. So here's President Trump. We're bouncing back to Meet the Fake Press and what he had to say about Jasmine Crockett and overall leadership within the Democrat Party. Let's hear it.
I can't name one Democrat. I mean, I look at the Democrats, they're in total disarray. They have a new person named Crockett. I watched her speak the other day. She's definitely a low IQ person. And they said she's the future of the party.
Let it be. I get it. Like, you could hear him. He's baffled. Let her be. She sat through committee today. They're putting up all these amendments that have nothing to do. We're talking about reconciliation. It has to do with money, not with legislation. And the Democrats are trying to injunct or insert all of these legislative-driven amendments, which they're automatic no's. Like 100% no's, no matter what. In addition to that, they're sitting there talking about how firing federal workers who are non-productive or against the president, union busting federal organizations who, again, all they do is raise money for the Democrat Party. All they do is raise money for the Resist Trump movement. If that's the way you're going to weaponize your union in the workplace and not use it for what it's for, which is protecting the employees who are being abused by the managers who are standing up to President Trump and not getting fired at a fast enough pace, then you shouldn't have one. And the federal employees can go out and get their own representation. There are national organizations which they can pay a nominal fee, which is similar to what their union dues are, and they can get representation through them. But, here's the deal. at some point, and I saw it with COVID, the media will abandon the left. And you saw it in the last election cycle, right before Joe Biden got out. They really started pushing back on everything he did, every decision he made. And it was like almost, the Democrats, the politicians, they were so offended at how dare you, my media, go against me. But they saw what was coming. And it was the rise of the America First movement out of the ashes of the 2020 presidential election cycle. And then when you really saw the media pretty much cut all ties, and I would say didn't even give Kamala Harris a fair shake, was after Butler. And when Donald Trump stood up with blood on his face and said, fight, 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 and he wasn't dead, those media executives knew that this was going to be almost impossible to stop. Turned out to be correct. And here we are. But it hasn't been easy. And the media, at least in the initial stages of the second Trump term, have dug in. And to this point, have been able to carry fake news narratives successfully for sometimes weeks at a time until President Trump, interjects the art of the weave and starts talking about crazy things, running for a third term, reopening Alcatraz prison, and so on and so forth. So I'll leave it at that. And we'll pick this right up with Texas Congressman Troy Nehls. But before we do, here's another check-in with one of our partners.
It's an unpleasant truth that 42% of Americans are obese and 79% of Americans are overweight. That's practically 1 in every 2 Americans living day to day with every minute counting down to the end of an unhealthy existence. It's time to change that and make Americans healthy again. You've probably heard about weight loss injections that can help you get back into that right mindset and help curb those cravings so you can focus on what's really important. New Hope Wellness has changed thousands of lives, and maybe it can change yours too. They are American family-owned and operated with the goal of saving lives. With convenient telehealth options, you can speak to a licensed professional from the comfort of your own home, and all products are delivered discreetly to your front door. Visit newhopewellness.com/state and start your journey to a better you. That's newhopewellness.com/state to get your free consultation and $100 off your first order. 1-800-527-2150. Make America healthy again.
All right, joining us first on the show today, this big Tuesday edition of the Steak for Breakfast podcast, he's the congressman who represents Texas's 22nd congressional district, which means we're welcoming back Representative Troy Nehls. Thanks for coming on the show.
Good to be with you.
Congressman, I think no one could probably provide some great commentary to start things off on post first 100 days for President Trump. Someone who was so excited to see President Trump get back to the White House, all the hard work that's been done both on Capitol Hill and coming out of the West Wing since he's gotten there. Give us a little bit of a recap from your perspective, Congressman, and how important the next 100 days is going to be as well.
Well, the first 100 days, there's always a report card out. The dishonest media and everybody will tell you what's the first 100 days like. They do it in every administration. I would give President Trump and his entire team an A+. I give him an A+. And I still think that a majority of the conversations that are taking place in our country is what he is doing with the border.
Sure.
It really is the border, and deporting over 100,000, seeing a 90-something% decline in border crossings. What he's doing now with it's not the CB1 app, it's the CB Home app, encouraging people, listen, if you self-deport, because you came over here, you knew you're not allowed to just illegally enter our southern border, we'll provide some financial assistance for you to go back where you came from. So I think he's doing great. I think I believe the American people support the president and most everything he's done. There's some concerns about tariffs and some other stuff, but overall, well done, sir. Elon Musk, well done.
You make some great points there, Congressman. I love the angle you took with the CBP Home app, as it's now known. Listen, that's kind of cutting edge. You would think that for all the administrative processes, all the regulatory stuff, obviously the interpretation of the laws, the things that people have pushed back on President Trump on how, listen, for the amount of people that have come in here just under the last 4 years, talk about the reality of how long it would take to get all those people literally processed to go through start to finish with the immigration courts and the appeals. And that's after like the apprehensions and detentions. It's not realistic for a Supreme Court or for federal judges to sit on the sidelines for 4 years while a president like Joe Biden and a vice president like Kamala Harris let all these people in, and then the American people will Congress back into the majority, President Trump back into the White House, flip the Senate to Republican control to take care of this problem, and then set up every roadblock imaginable to try and stop them.
Yeah, tens of millions of them that have entered our southern border under Joe Biden. And he had a plan. He wanted to make them all eventually, the amnesty, and everybody's going to be a voter one day. And then the Democrat Party would have one party control from here on out. So it didn't work because the American people saw through this and they said, we don't like it. We don't like any of it. And some of the people you're entering, not all of them have bad intentions, but many of them did, and they've harmed and killed our wonderful people here. And I can go case by case. I mean, there's too many of them. So I think his idea about using an app, I mean, obviously the CBP One app was a way to this administration, the previous administration, to find a way to encourage people to come into our country, finding workarounds and everything else. This CB Home app is just in saying, hey, listen, this is an app that we're going to deport you. You can do it on your own, self-deportation, and we're going to provide some financial assistance for airline tickets and travel and stuff to get you back where you came from. And I think it's a brilliant idea. And it's going to save tens of millions of dollars. It costs a lot of money to try to detain somebody, apprehend them, detain them, put them in some type of a county jail or whatever. It costs tens of thousands of dollars. This is a way to make it more affordable, because logistically, my friend, we couldn't deport everybody that's here illegally. It's hard enough to just get the bad hombres out,
right?
The tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands. So I think this is a good move. Just very, very forward leaning. Great move.
No, I think it is as well. And moving forward, we're going to see just how successful this is going to be. Listen, it's a busy time up on Capitol Hill. We're in the markups phase of that big, beautiful bill for President Trump after the passage of the budget resolution right before Easter. Got some pretty good numbers from Speaker Johnson. Might take maybe a week longer to get everything done, but I think on the news yesterday I was seeing like 7 committees down with 4 to go. Maybe you give our listenership a little bit of an update on how the reconciliation package process is going and where we go from here.
Yes, there are about 11 committees that have some jurisdiction over this reconciliation, and your audience needs to understand that this is a tool that's used by the majority when you have a unified government, because it forgoes the filibuster in the Senate. So we just need a simple majority on the Senate and the House, and this is a way to obviously address the fiscal irresponsibility we've seen in Washington for years, the bloated agencies, the spending. So we have a plan, this one big, beautiful bill to help with to make the tax cuts from 2017 permanent. We got to do it, help small business, right? And reduce spending up to 1.5 trillion, reducing spending. So this is an opportunity. This is the time. We need to do it now with reconciliation. And that's what you're going to see here over the next, 30, 60 days. The intent was to get something done by Memorial Day, but now I think we may have to wait maybe a little bit in June. That's okay. Just do not let the American people know that we can't get this done before our August break. We have to get it done, because this will be true success for President Trump and his administration. The 2 big committees that have the most work to do, and they'll probably be next week, is Ways and Means and Energy and Commerce. Yep. Obviously, Ways and Means, that committee, folks, takes care of all the tax law. So they want to make Trump's tax cuts permanent. That's under that committee. And then Energy and Commerce, dealing with health and stuff, dealing with Medicaid. And I support the idea. Well, number one, you got millions of illegals on Medicaid. I don't know why we have that.
True
and
story.
Then there are other able-bodied individuals on Medicaid. We need to put some work requirements on that as well. We just need to do it. What the hell are we doing? We can be better than that.
No, we certainly can. And when you're looking at ways to get to plausible and workable solutions for the American people. And watching this in committee work, your esteemed colleagues from the other side of the aisle seem to be doing everything they can to slow this process down, whether it's the grandstanding and usage of their full time, whether it's want to promote and insert the amendments, whether it's how Chuck Schumer has previewed that this is going to be the slowest slow walk in the history of mankind once it gets up to the Senate, even though they know it's the non-majority threshold, the less than 50 votes plus one that's going to be able to get this passed to President Trump's desk. Talk about that, how this country, when President Trump came back to the White House, was in really bad shape following Joe Biden and Kamala Harris's time in office. Republicans have hustled and tried to keep up with the pace of President Trump since he's gotten back in the Oval, but Democrats just don't care, and they'd rather slow walk this to minimize or postpone some accomplishments that are definitely coming down the road, just for the sole fact of it's what Democrats do. They just want to waste time and money in any attempt to try to retain whatever kind of power and relevance that they can hold on to.
That's right. When you go through this process of reconciliation, it's a one-sided conversation. My two committees, Transportation and Infrastructure, as well as Judiciary, we had very, very long reconciliation. We had our hearings, you call them markups. We had them last week. And every amendment that was offered by the Democrat failed. And they knew it was going to fail because we were united. It's hard to unite the Republicans, but we're united on this reconciliation. So they kept offering their amendments and we kept voting them down. We knew it was going to take place, but it wasn't an opportunity for us to go back and forth because we're the majority. We own this. And it's going to be a one-sided conversation. Quite honestly, I don't care what the Democrats think. We shouldn't care what they think. We certainly shouldn't care what Chuck Schumer thinks. And Chuck, you may try to slow it down all you want, but we only need 51 votes over in the Senate, and we need to get this to the White House so he can sign it and make these changes permanent. So this is our opportunity in time to do this, because who knows, my friend, what happens in the midterms. Can we keep the House? Should we keep the House? I think the American people like the idea of Republicans being in charge because we're being responsible with their tax dollars, their hard-earned tax dollars. So I think things are going well right now, but we can't lose out on an opportunity to deliver on Trump's agenda. Some of the committees had to find more, had to cut, and some of the committees had to find a way to raise revenues, and we did that. And Ways and Means has an opportunity to go out there and make these tax cuts permanent. I have an idea of putting a tax on the net proceeds, the profits on their investments, and we would bring in $7 to $10 billion a year. Harvard's got $53 billion in their endowment, and it keeps going up and up and up. They're making hundreds of millions of dollars on the investments on those endowments. And they're not taxed. They're taxed at 1.4%. Put a 21% tax on it. We can generate an extra $7 to $10 billion annually. And we should do it. We should do it on these private universities that have a certain criteria. So there's opportunities for us to do good for the American people. And now's the time. We must do it.
No, it is coming in the form of reconciliation. And then in closing today, Congressman, some of the cool announcements that we'd seen from President Trump over the course of the last couple of days. He talked about implementing tariffs on essentially Hollywood movie makers for not making their movies here in the United States. You also saw President Trump calling out the country of China for obviously stealing a lot of the IP-related things in regards to movie making, in addition to the big announcement from the Oval Office yesterday, where the NFL will be bringing the NFL draft to the National Mall in Washington, D.C. in a few years. Just a couple of really amazing announcements to see President Trump highlighting some of the things that not just make, the country or physical things, but part of the culture of America great, and wanting to highlight and promote those things and put them on display to not only kind of preserve them for the road moving forward, but also to, kind of highlight how important it is to be able to hold on to our culture and to promote that and make all of the, people who are going to be involved in this active parts of the community again.
Sure. I love the idea of bringing the draft here. Listen, D.C., obviously, it's our capital, nation's capital. It's a beautiful city, got a lot of history here, a lot of beautiful buildings, but there's a lot of trash around here, a lot of trash in this city. It's been run by Democrats. Mary Bowser, she's not too bright. Let's just be honest. She's not too bright. So I think President Trump is doing everything he can to try to bring some reputation, some quality back to this city. And he just wants to clean it up. We got to take out the trash. And so I think Donald Trump wants to do everything he possibly can to bring some pride back to the city, because there's so many visitors. A lot of people come up here. You wouldn't believe the tours that are taking place up here with all the schools and all these different groups of people, even foreign visitors coming to visit our nation's capital. So he just wants to clean up the trash, and I think he's doing well. As it relates to the movies, you know what? I tell you, I haven't been to a theater in a few years. Matter of fact, after COVID, I haven't been to a movie theater.
Sure.
You know, you get so much done now online with Netflix and with Prime Video and all that other stuff. But when you find out that Netflix, that a majority of the movies that you see on your television here are made overseas, because they say you can get cheaper production costs over there. Well, it's not only movies, it's cars, it's pharmaceuticals, it's everything else. And you wonder why China's kicking our tail. Right. So I believe Donald Trump is on the right. Let's bring movies. Let's get our movie industry back and bring our production back to the United States of America. He's a smart guy. Donald Trump knows exactly what he's doing. I support him on all of it. I support him on the tariffs, because China hasn't been fair. Stealing our AI. They like to steal. They're crooks. They're thieves. We must hold China accountable. And I believe we have a president today that is doing so.
We had a congressman here today who gave an interview that matches that energy right now here on Steak for Breakfast. Listen, Congressman, always a treat when we catch up with you. Today we've got everything live linked in our show description, including a link to your congressional website. They can sign up for the newsletter, see all the great work you're doing there. Where can we find you on social media? We'll live link that as well.
You can find me at Rep Troy Nails, at Rep Troy Nails. You guys are great. Your listeners, your audience, wonderful. God bless this great country and Donald Trump.
Easy money, catching up with the man who's representing Texas 22 out there fighting for all the American people, Representative Troy Nehls. Thanks for joining us on the show today. Have a great rest of your week, sir, and we'll see you again soon.
God bless.
Guys, we're coming back with another all-new edition of the Steak for Breakfast podcast, so sit back, relax, and let us change the way you consume your news.